Oh, I don't mind. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Jasoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana Jasoda Nandana Raja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dhari Jasodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jasodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. So now, Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, let's look at this verse. Yavana Jayeta Paravaresmin Visheshare Drastari Bhakti Yoga Tavat Stiviya Purushasya Rupam Kriyavasane Prayatak Smareta. That explains everything. So, Javid Najayeta, as long as Bhakti Yoga does not arise. Jayeta is actually from the verb jan, to take birth. So in Sanskrit, often to arise, to take birth, the word is often used like that. Like Janmadya, Jasya Jataha, the birth of the universe. So as long as Bhakti Yoga, in other words, the disciplined practice of devotion to Krishna, na jayeta, as long as it does not arise, then Tavat, and then for that amount of time, there's for the time that it doesn't arise, as long as it doesn't arise, so for that period, Tavat Stavia Purushasya Rupam Kriyavasane Prayataksmareta. Prayataha, one should carefully, Smareta, one should carefully remember Rupam, the form of the Purusha, Stavia, which Prabhupada translates here as the gross materialist form. One should remember that as long as Bhakti Yoga does not arise in the Vishweshware, in the Lord of the universe, Vishwa Ishware, Drashtari, in the seer. This is very interesting because what does it mean to have false ego? False ego means one is always thinking of oneself, and other people are just instruments for one's own enjoyment. Like, I want people to respect me, or I want people I don't like to get out of my life, or I want people to be my customers and give me money, or I want them to applaud and appreciate me. So we see other people as objects to gratify us, not as subjects of their own life. And so, interestingly, there's something similar, because when you see the universal form, it's not like you care about the feelings of the universal form, because it's not even clear exactly what the feelings are of the universal form. And so you can see how there is it's natural that people who are thinking of themselves and seeing other people as objects of their enjoyment would also worship a form of the Lord in which you don't really think a lot about the feelings of the Lord. You're just kind of admiring it or wondering at it or looking at it as an object of your consciousness. And also, it's not clear how one serves the universal form. Like, do you offer a tulsi leaf to the Vishwarupa? If you look at Arjuna's response in the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna, chapter 11, saw this overwhelming universal form, he just fell to the ground in reverences. In fact, he wasn't even sure where the ground was, because there's this really striking statement that from Arjuna, where he says, Disho na jane, which literally means I don't know the directions. Disho means the directions, and na jane, I don't know, I don't recognize it. In other words, this was like a super bad LSD trip or something. I mean, where Arjuna didn't even know like what's up, what's down, what's left or right. He was literally completely disoriented, because it was just so powerful that I remember I had an experience like that once. I was in Mayapur I think it was just after Gaur Purnima. I was up on the roof of the Long building, because there were only two buildings at that time, the Long building and the Lotus building. And there was a lightning storm like I had never seen before. You must have seen lightning storms at Mayapur. Not so much. Well, I guess I was lucky then. And so, but this lightning storm was so powerful. I mean, these lightning bolts would just strike, and not so far away, and like literally for a second or two, it was exactly like daylight. I mean, it was daylight. You could see the green grass, the blue river, the blue sky. I mean, everything was exact. It was like another sun. Like these lightning bolts, and then everything would go dark again, and then there'd be another one. But it was so powerful. I remember I actually had to sit down. I was actually losing my balance, because it was just so powerful. It was overwhelming. Lord Chaitanya is showing his power. So imagine the universal form. That was just a lightning storm. So Arjuna literally was just completely disoriented. And so it's not a worshipful mood. It's not something where you just, it brings out your love or tender feelings. It's just overwhelming. And so this is appropriate for people who have so much false ego or so much bodily identification. They really haven't got a lot of tender feelings to give. So, so you can see, in other words, you can see the correspondence why, in a certain state of consciousness, that's the right form for you to worship. And even though obviously in the West or just outside of India, people don't literally meditate on all the different planets, on different limbs of the universal form and all that, but they do worship nature. In fact, there's even a common term, nature lovers. And so nature lovers is kind of like the Mleccha version of worshiping the Vishwarupa. To be a nature lover. I mean, even astronomers, right? They're just, the ones who are kind of in it for the right reasons. They're overwhelmed just by the majesty and the dimension of the universe, isn't it? And so you could say that astronomy, the study of the universe, is a type of worship of the Vishwarupa. So the point I'm making here is, obviously India has a particular culture, so they do things in a particular way, but these are universal propensities. So even though in the West they don't read the second canto of the Bhagavatam, and they don't technically worship the universal form, but they are in awe of the universe. because the distances, the power, it's overwhelming, isn't it? And they speak that way, don't they? It's just, I mean, you see that like when they get a rocket up in space, see a NASA, everybody starts cheering and high-fiving and everything. And uh, so this is a universal, what I'm trying to say, this is not just something from India. This is a universal human propensity at a certain stage of consciousness to respond in a certain way to the universe. So, Vishweshwari, the Lord of the, and Drashtari. Does Drashtari mean, because we're saying here, as long as Bhakti Yoga does not arise in the Lord, and then different descriptions of the Lord. So one of them is Drashtari, which simply means the seer. This is in the seer, it's the locative form. So as long as Bhakti Yoga does not arise in the cosmic Lord, in the seer. And this again is a very important point, because in different ways, the Bhagavatam is kind of circling around this this notion, which was explained explicitly earlier in the first canto, that evam drashtari, the same word, drishyatvam, aropitam abudhivi, that how does that verse begin? Oh yeah, Megao go anilo. Anyway, that Yata nabasi Megao go renurva partivo anile evam drashtari drishyatvam aropitam abudhivi. It's a very powerful, very modern philosophical statement that, as I was saying earlier, just as we yata nabasi Megao go, just as, for example, you impose clouds and just visible atmospheric conditions, whether it's fog or rain or dust or whatever, and we say the sky is cloudy or the sky is humid or whatever. And so to understand this, of course, you have to get the technical distinction of the Mahabhutas. And so this is a very common analogy. Krishna uses this analogy in chapter 9 of the Gita, because the sky, space, is the one element of the five, I've said this many times, which does not interact with the other four elements. And so when you say the sky, because we have sort of a sloppy way of talking, we say the sky is not cloudy, like home on the range, or the sky is not cloudy all day. But technically the sky is never cloudy, because sky is one of the five great elements. It's just space. In Sanskrit, sky means space. And like we say, space, time, and all that. So the word for sky means space. And so we impose cloudiness or other atmospheric conditions on the sky, or a rainurva partivonile, or we impose dustiness, dust on the air, because technically there's a pure element of air, and dust is the earth element. So even though they mix together, they're technically different. So in the same way, so what's this an analogy for? It's an analogy for the fact that we impose drishyatvam, the state of being the object of vision, on someone who's actually the seer. But what this means is this, again, as I've explained so many times, that there's a modern word sort of, which is objectifying someone. That's a bad thing. Objectifying someone doesn't mean that you see them objectively. It's the opposite. It means that you see them as an object of your consciousness, and not, you don't see them as the subject of their consciousness. And of course, the more material desire one has, the worse this gets. Like, let's say if a man looks at a woman with lust, then he's not seeing that woman as the subject of her own life, with her own self-interest, her own purposes. Rather, he's seeing that woman as an object of his enjoyment, or ditto for the woman. Looking for a very rich man with a confirmed, documented terminal illness and a willingness to marry without a prenup. Right? It's like, so I was just reminded, I saw this hilarious billboard in LA. It must have been 20 years ago. because the idea of the billboard was to say that it was a billboard for this sort of very fashionable shopping mall touching near where I live, and they're trying to say things aren't always what they seem. In other words, they probably did marketing survey that people have a certain image of the mall, but and therefore they don't go there. They think it's very expensive. But so anyway, so this theme that things aren't always what they seem. They had this little short guy, out of here, and just this short little old man who wasn't very good looking, and then next to him was this sort of Barbie doll type lady, the hourglass figure and all that. And then it said underneath it, he's not rich, she's really in love. And so the theme of the billboard was things aren't always what they seem around here. So anyway, getting back to that. So if I look at it, if I have intense material desire, it can be lust, it can be greed. It's like I want to sell things to other people, and I know they don't need these things, or I'm just openly, well, not openly, covertly cheating them. But whenever you see someone as an object of your pleasure, this person can give me something I want, and you're not looking at that person as the subject of their own interest, of their own life. And so, in the same way, if someone's in that mood, then they worship the universal form. Because with the universal form, you don't really have to worry a lot. It's not that you have to just serve the universal form. You just kind of stare at it and wonder, and then it goes away. And it was just kind of a revelation showing you the power of God. So here that same word which is used in the verse, evam drashtari drishyatvam, to impose the state of being the object of seeing on the seer. Other people are seers. Other people have their own consciousness, their own interests, their own feelings. They're not simply objects of my pleasure. And so in the same way, people who, if they approach the personal form of God, would approach God with this mentality, give me this, give me that. So rather than develop an absurd relationship with the personal form of God where you just want things, just go play with the universal form for a while. Because with the universal form, you can be the seer and you can just stare at it and wonder and all that. Actually, I saw this, I mentioned this before, but Krishna gave me an experience of this, of people, even modern Western people, practically worshiping a manifestation of nature. I was at the LA temple, it was many years ago, probably around, I can't remember anymore. It was many years ago. And of course, the temple is almost on the corner of Venice Boulevard, Whatseek and Venice Boulevard. And so under Venice Boulevard, running from downtown all the way to the coast to Venice, there is a pipeline. I guess it's natural gas, whatever it is, and it runs right under Venice Boulevard. And so something happened, and the gas, I guess, got blocked. And this is just right directly across from the temple. And there was this huge explosion. And because there was just all this gas pouring, and of course they shut off the valve at a certain point, but it takes a while because there's already so much gas that got between that, the nearest valve and that point. And so what happened was there was this literally like this biblical pillar of fire that just rose into the sky. And this thing must have been like, I don't know, like maybe a couple 100 feet up or something. It was just this, it was like a biblical thing, a pillar of fire swirling around. And it was so astonishing that I remember people, because on the other side of Venice, the temple, of course, now, there's Sony Studios and there's a hospital. So all of these people working in these buildings, they just came pouring out of the buildings. There were, hundreds and hundreds of people, people in LA who think that they're cool, little do they know. But anyway, so they were just all just just marveling, astonished, just frozen in place, just looking at this pillar of fire. And at that point, I was thinking of the universal form. How people, I mean, even Krishna's material creation does inspire awe and veneration and just wonder. And of course, in that mood, no one was thinking of worship. Maybe it was India; they would have brought little offerings or something, put little whatever, gone to the nearest sweet shop and put a sweet or something. But this is these were lunches, so they were just. But I could see the logic of the universal form. So Tavat Stivya Purushasya Rup. So I'll read the. So why don't we chant this a few times, and then I'll read the translation in purple. So Yavanna Jayeta Paravadesmin. Yavanna Jayeta Paravadesmin. Yavanna Jayeta Paravadesmin. Yavanna Jayeta Paravadesmin. Vishweshware Drashtari Bhakti Yoga. Vishweshware Drashtari Bhakti Yoga. Vishweshware Drashtari Bhakti Yoga. Vishweshware Drashtari Bhakti Yoga. Tavat Staviyak Purushasya Rupam. Tavat Staviyak Purushasya Rupam. Tavat Staviyak Purushasya Rupam. Tavastaya Purushasya Rupam. Kriyavasane Prayatak Smarita. Kriyavasane Prayatak Smarita. Kriyavasane Prayatak Smarita. Kriyavasane Prayatak Smarita. One word about the word Prayatak, which Prabhupada translates it with proper attention. Yata is the past passive participle of the same word as yama, like in the yoga, yama, niyama. And so this is just prayama. You can put different prefixes on it. And so yata, because yama means a discipline. And so yata means disciplined. And so prayata means, very disciplined in your meditation. So it's actually describing a disciplined process. Smareta, one should remember. So let's read. I'll read. Oh, does anyone want to chant this? Try your luck. No. Very good. Yavanna Jayeta Paravarismin.
Vishweshware Tashtari Bhakti Yoga.
Vishweshware Tashtari Bhakti Yoga.
Tavat Staviya Purushasya Rupam.
Tavat Staviya Purushasya Rupam.
Kriyavasane Prayatasmaritam.
Kriyavasane Prayatasmaritam. Very good. So, Prabhupada's translation: unless the gross materialist develops a sense of loving service, that's like Yavat, unto the Supreme Lord, the seer of both the transcendental and material worlds, he should remember or meditate upon the universal form of the Lord at the end of his prescribed duties. Prabhupada's purport: the Supreme Lord is the seer, Drashtari, the seer of all worlds, both material and transcendental. In other words, the Supreme Lord is the ultimate beneficiary and enjoyer of all worlds, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 5:29, Bhoktaram Yagyata Pasam, etc. The spiritual world is the manifestation of his internal potency, and the material world is the manifestation of his external potency. The living entities are also his marginal potency, and by their own choice, they can live in either the transcendental or material world. The material world is not a fit place for living entities because they are spiritually one with the Lord. Not a fit place. This is not a fit place. And in the material world, the living entities become conditioned by the laws of the material world. The Lord wants all living entities who are his parts and parcels, to live with him in the transcendental world, and for enlightening conditioned souls in the material world, all the Vedas and the revealed scriptures are there, expressly to recall the conditioned souls back home, back to Godhead. Hmm?
Haribol.
Haribol. Yeah, we were never with Krishna, but we have to go back to Krishna. Unfortunately, the conditioned living entities, although suffering continually the threefold miseries of conditioned life, are not very serious about going back to Godhead. Not very serious about going back to Godhead. It is due to their misguided way of living, complicated by sins and virtues. Some of them who are virtuous by deeds begin to reestablish the lost relation with the Lord, but they are unable to understand the personal feature of the Lord. The real purpose of life is to make contact with the Lord and be engaged in his service. That is the natural position of the living entities. But those who are impersonalists and are unable to render any loving service to the Lord have been advised to meditate upon his impersonal feature, the Virat Rupa, or universal form. So some Vaishnavas, still contaminated by this impersonal idea, say that we are never with Krishna. Because if it's our nature to be with Krishna, to serve Krishna, why wouldn't we be with him? As Prabhupada says, because we chose not to. How could Krishna punish us? Because the material world is a punishment. It's miserable. How could Krishna punish us for something we didn't choose? That's absurd. And how could you choose the material world if you didn't know what the other choices were? If you go to a restaurant and they give you a menu that only has half the items on it, you're not being given a real choice. If you're not given full information, you're not being given the real. It's like you go to a store and let's say you want to buy, I don't know, a computer, and it costs $3,000, and they don't tell you there's a computer for half the price, which actually is just as good or better. It does exactly everything the other one does. It has a record of being durable, lasting. In every way, it's equal or better to the other computer, but they don't tell you about it. So how could Krishna put you in the material world to suffer without telling you about your other choices? So this nonsense attracts people who wouldn't know philosophy if they tripped over it. How could Krishna make you suffer, put you in a miserable place? How could you be responsible for your own suffering if you didn't know the alternatives? And to know the alternatives means you actually understand them. So the idea that we never knew Krishna, but we're simply, since beginningless time, we're put in a miserable place without even knowing there are other options is incredibly bad philosophy. So anyway, there are many points there. The only place in the Bhagavatam that Krishna even talks about this is the fourth canto, chapter 28, verses 53 and 55, where Krishna says, twice you rejected me. Now, how could we be responsible for rejecting Krishna if we didn't know what we were rejecting? Logically, this philosophy, simple logic, you can't reject something because the very notion of rejecting entails, that means logically requires, that you know what you're rejecting. Otherwise, but let's say, for example, you reject something because you didn't know what it was and no one told you. And to use the usual legal standard, a normal person doing due diligence would not be able to understand what they were rejecting. So the notion of rejecting and being responsible for your act requires that you know what you're rejecting. If you didn't know and you had no way to know and there was no information available, you're not morally or responsible. So the very fact that Krishna said, and this is very direct Sanskrit, these are not Sanskrit words that have hidden meanings and maybe it's actually this and that. No, this is very explicit, direct, normal Sanskrit, where Krishna says twice, you rejected me and came to this world. So if everything else fails, read the Shastra. Anyway, so for the less intelligent beginners, meditation on the impersonal feature, the Virat Rupa, or universal form of the Lord, will gradually qualify one to rise to personal contact. One is advised herewith to meditate upon the Virat Rupa specified in the previous chapters in order to understand how the different planets, seas, mountains, rivers, birds, beasts, human beings, demigods, and all that we can conceive are but different parts and limbs of the Lord's Virat form. This sort of thinking is also a type of meditation on the absolute truth, and as soon as such meditation begins, one develops one's godly qualities, and the whole world appears to be a happy and peaceful residence for all the people of the world. That's sort of the Paramahamsa vision. Without such meditation on God, either personal or impersonal, all good qualities of the human being become covered with misconceptions regarding his constitutional position, and without such advanced knowledge, the whole world becomes a hell for the human being. Welcome to 2024, where the whole world has become a hell. So anyway, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai. Any questions on this?
CC.
What's that?
When are we going to read CC?
That's a very good question. Okay, we should read CC on Sunday. So maybe we can read it tomorrow and then